Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, I don't know whether you have ever had children, and if you have, well, presumably you'd have to be a female to actually give birth. I know there's a lot of sort of woke stuff out there to suggest that men can do it, but we're not getting into that conversation today. But I've had three children with my partner, my ex-wife, and we had one in a hospital and two at home. And having a home birth was actually two home births was the best thing that ever could happen. However, have you then thought about what do I do? Do I register the children with the state? Do I give away? Let me think. Give away our power, or the power of our biological creations. That might sound a bit strange to you, but many people, well, most of us do. And is that then a fight as we go further down the line with what is lawful and what is legal and the whole traps that go on with it? My guest today is a lady called Calista. She's in Australia and she's had trouble with the police when she just wanted to give antibiotics, and cops turned up, and she didn't want to register children, and she stands up for all the rights of you and I. She joins me now, and she's got a great story. Hello, Calista.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much.
Now, I don't
Very
know
honored to
how.
be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Now, I garbled my way as I often do in these situations because I don't fully always know exactly where the conversation's going to go. But you have a great story, and I know you told it on your channel, which is the Calista Show. We'll put a link in the description so people can find out more about you. So, yeah, I was mentioning there I had home births. Now I know that, and of course I'm talking about my wife did the work. I was making, if I remember rightly, egg on toast for the midwife, and holding hand and breathing in time with my wife at the time as we did this, and it was an absolute miraculous thing to happen. It wasn't
Mm,
so exciting, and it was incredibly off-putting going to a hospital because there was screams in the next room, and it was a terrifying experience, especially being the first time that Dawn, my wife, had given birth. So
mm.
tell us about your situation, and then tell us about this thing that you mentioned to me, giving away our power of our biological creations, which presumably means our babies.
Yeah, does mean our babies. Well, I guess, do you want me to launch straight into the hospital story? Do you want me to give a
Yeah,
bit of
let's.
an idea of that, and then we'll
Yeah, give
digress
us an
from
idea.
there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I was probably about 22 at the time, I think, and I was pregnant with my first son. I've now got four, and I've had three freeborn babies, which I'll go into afterwards. But I my I wanted to actually have my baby at home. It was one of those moments where I was in that place where I knew that I was born at home. And there were certain circumstances around my own home birth, and my mother and I almost died. So there was a part of me that wanted to sort of change that in me. And so I wanted to have a home birth, and then you're young and your partner's uncomfortable, and everyone around you is just thinking you're nuts. And so I went against my intuition. I went in and I went to the hospital. And just to give you a bit of a story of that, I went in with this belief that our body actually knows what it's doing, and there's a higher intelligence to what is actually going on. And sometimes it's actually surrendering to that whole process that allows for things to just run smoothly. And so
That doesn't
um,
sound like an unreasonable belief. I mean, I
I
should
don't think
say.
so. But then mix that going into a hospital, and they go, well, we want to draw your blood, and we want you to pee in a cup, and we want you to drink this glucose syrup, and we want to put some juice into you. Let's use that phrase. We'll put
Mm.
some juice into you. We'll juice you up, and we want to talk about giving that to your baby as soon as it comes out. And when I was growing up, I was actually homeschooled, so I was a massive reader. I always had my nose in a book. One of the books that I read when I was really young was Vaccine Roulette, which was put out by the American Vaccine Network. And it was a compilation, a whole combination of people's firsthand stories. Absolutely devastating book. Anyone ever wants to kind of get into it, it's a great book to start. However, going into this situation where they have all of these protocols and procedures, and I'm there going, well, why do I need to do it? I'm fit and I'm healthy. Why do I need to actually starve myself and then have glucose syrup and stress my immune system and my baby and me and run up my cortisol for you to check whether I might have diabetes when there's absolutely no signs, and all the rest of the poking and the prodding. And so I went through it. I did go through it, and my son was born at 10 days, about 10 days over the so-called due date, which again is sort of this arbitrary number. Only about 2%
Right.
of babies actually come on their due date. And he came out, and I popped him on my chest, and I kept my placenta because part of also the homeschooling journey, which is one of the things that I was really fortunate to experience, was my dad was really into law, and he was very fascinated by the political system and these things, what people sometimes call the straw man or the trust,
Yeah.
which is associated when uh, mum or dad go and register their babies.
Yes.
So it always had intrigued me, and it was something I was sort of aware of, but I didn't have a lot of understanding about it. And when I left home at 16, I didn't know anyone else who knew about it. So
Right.
I end up a few years later, I've had my son, and I'm going, well, I actually don't know what to do. If I went back now with the knowledge I know now, I wouldn't have done
Yes.
anything. I wouldn't have done
Right.
anything. I honestly, I would have just gone, well, sweetheart, we're going to have to talk about this. So you're not nervous about me having my baby at home. We're just going to do it and not register it.
Yeah.
But coming back to 16 years ago, yeah, and there's sort of that place I think we go through when like there's a lot of fear into that system.
Yes, of
And the
course.
second you put your foot into a hospital, you're absolutely drowned in fear. And so that was something that, I'm like fighting between fear and going, that doesn't even sound true. And that sounds ridiculous, but I've never done this before. Yeah, I've never had a
And I
baby.
mean, and everybody has their kids in the hospital. It's become the mainstream thing, isn't it? We've forgotten
Yeah.
that everybody didn't have their kids in a hospital. It was a very unusual thing. You'd be surrounded by your family, and it would be something that was very precious. But intrinsically, women would know their bodies,
Mm.
and family members, presumably the female family members, would have been there to reassure in that situation. But we are in such a world that has separated the family apart that
Mm.
now, we are giving away that power to medical people in sterile environments in big corporate buildings.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing as well that sort of comes in with stress is that, and I see this with clients, which, after I had my first son, I went off and I actually went up north and worked really, really closely with pregnant women. So I did a postgrad in pediatrics and pregnancy. Um, and you see people that are in stress or they've had birth trauma, and it's almost like they can't get, like the woman struggles to get back into their feminine energy, like the energy of being vulnerable or being able to receive or just being creative or being flexible, and they're more in this very rigid, it just stressed out sort of mode, which can affect all these other different things. So plus obviously stress is used to control people,
Yes.
and people that walk into a hospital and have, say, a C-section or have more and more interventions, whether it's the baby's getting induced or more things are taken out of the woman or whatever else is done, there's always a price tag with that. So I had my son, and all was well. And they brought me food actually a couple of hours later. And this is the funny thing: when you're in a hospital, you're poked and you're prodded and you're interrupted. And do you have any animals?
I have a cat.
You have a cat. So could you imagine that if your cat had kittens, do you think it wouldn't want to be poked and prodded? It'd probably hide away
No.
in a cupboard somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fortunate thing was the staff are actually quite lovely at there. So they did leave me alone for the most part. And, I brought my son out and all the rest, and I kept his placenta and I took it home. And they wouldn't let me leave until my little boy had passed meconium, which is their first bowel action after they are born, unless they're distressed, because sometimes it can get released in the uterus when, like, before Bubba comes out. And I said, yeah, okay. And this woman sat down with me, and there must have been a note on my file because she starts going into the juice, going, you really need to have this and that. And she's saying how she doesn't believe in it either, but she gave it to her daughter to protect her. And, someone who obviously had come in here and I've never had any juice in my entire life and, grown up with pretty strong beliefs around it and educating myself about the ingredients and what it does and the fact that there's not one trial actually out there to prove that it's safe.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking at this woman going, really? That makes sense to you? Anyway, he passed it. I got out of there. I went down to the shop and bought a steak. And we went home and ate it. I was so hungry. I was like,
I
man,
bet.
I haven't eaten in 24 hours. I'm starving. Um, anyway, but 2 days later, I ended up going back to the hospital quickly. And the lady there, the same nurse, stripped down my little boy and popped him on a heat bed. And he started crying. It was one of those artificially heated rooms, and they took his temperature once. Now, in a baby, you've actually got to take the temperature several times because their temperature fluctuates so much. And I'm
Yes.
going into some of this so that if there's mothers on here, or there's young women on here, or even dads on here, that they'll start looking at this in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, but
Why did you have to go back to the hospital after 2 days?
another sort of moment where I was like going against my intuition. So my son's turning to me as I'm speaking to him and that sort of thing. But my mum was like, look, it'd be really good to get his ears checked just in case. And, it's a sort of a benign sort of thing. It's a little click in the ear.
Right.
And,
After 2 days.
yeah, after 2 days. Yeah. So I went back to do that. And yeah, so my bub's there on the table. He's crying, taking one temperature. Like I said, temperatures fluctuate with
Yeah.
conditions and how warm they are and how comfortable they are. And they turn around and they call the pediatrician. The pediatrician comes in and goes, you need to you've got to go straight to the hospital. Otherwise your baby's going to die. And I was like, what? I've come in here with a perfectly healthy baby.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you need to go now or it's going to die. And I said, well, what's wrong with him? What are you actually going to put into my son? And she's getting all agitated. And she was only about my age. So, I was there 22, 23, whatever. And yeah, she would have only been probably fresh out of being indoctrinated by the system.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, look, can you just give us a minute? I'm going to talk to my partner. And the second she went out the door, I said, listen, get my bag. We're getting out of here. So we obviously took off. And on the way home, I grabbed a thermometer and I went home and I fed my son and he was breastfeeding and he changed his nappy and his temperature was absolutely fine. He went to sleep. And then I got a call from the hospital. And they basically said that if I didn't get to the main hospital, which was about 10 minutes further away, within a half hour, they would be calling the Department of Child Protection. And I said, but I'm going for a second opinion. I have the right to do that. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to go seek a second opinion. And they said, you've got half an hour. And so I hung up the phone, told my poor partner to grab the bag again. We jumped in the car, we took off, and we actually went into hiding for about 7 or 8 days. It took that long to sort of sort it out. So they had been instructed by the pediatrician, this is what we found out later, to forcibly remove our child, our biological creations, I should say. It's not a child. And an hour after we had left, I got a call from my next door neighbor saying that 6 cops in bulletproof vests and guns and all the get up forced their way into my apartment on the instruction to apparently forcibly remove my baby. Now, my kid has not one, he's now 16, he's just turned 16. He has no learning issues. He has no autism. He has no gut issues. There is nothing wrong with this kid. He is a bright, healthy young man. And what I found out later is that sometimes in a baby, in an infant, when they're that young, they'll actually put the antibiotics straight into the spinal cord. So my mother-in-law at the time was an obstetrician. My dad, obviously a chiropractor, a naturopath. My brother-in-law was a chiropractor. We had all these people on the phone to Department of Child Protection going, there's nothing wrong with this baby. This baby is totally fine. And it took still a week or so. So I was like, wow, what an abuse of power. I
Yes.
questioned them. And, it was this grand light bulb moment as well, just kind of going, you take an oath to do no harm. Here as a chiropractor, we take the same oath to do no harm. And so it was quite mind blowing, this whole thing. It actually took me a good week or so before I ended up sitting down and bawling my eyes out, realizing I'd come, a tiny fraction away from losing my son. And he never would have been the same kid if you would have put antibiotics into the spinal cord. You just don't recover from that. So that was the first one. And then I ended up going up north and working with thousands of pregnant women. And as a chiropractor, I actually do really long sessions. So I talk a lot with my clients, and we build these really, really strong relationships. And I used to go and even adjust them and do kinesiology on them, which is muscle testing to help detect and also clear emotions that are, becoming recurring patterns or possibly blocking them. So, and a lot of times when women had fear around pregnancy, that's actually going to block even the movement of energy going down through to allow a smooth passage of baby coming into the world. So I got really close to a lot of women there, and the stories were just horrendous. And one day I got it into my head and I said, you know what? I'm going to have a baby without any medical care and do the whole thing completely on my own. And I mean, I had a partner, but you know what I mean? Like, just trust my body
Yeah.
and do all of that. And,
Immaculate conception. I'm going to do
no,
it
no, no,
completely.
no. I mean, like, he laid out the
Yeah.
towels, and, he even helped me get it out because, see, this is the thing. Semen is very rich in natural prostaglandins. So, women should be doing that to help
Right.
them get it out. If they're feeling uncomfortable at that so-called due date, get your man he put it in there, get it back out.
Have a little poke around and sort of ease the passage. Is that
Well,
what
it
you're saying?
actually helps dilate the cervix. So
Well, that's
it,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, in hospitals, you would get an artificial prostaglandin put in there to help as
Right.
one of the ways to induce
Yes.
labor. But I have my own thoughts on that whole thing because I don't actually think that a baby should be induced, because of the fact that there's a sequence of events when it comes to labor. And when the baby's lungs mature, they actually secrete a hormone that then triggers labor. And then, the uterus will start to prime. And in that priming process, everything softens and allows baby to actually adjust so it comes out in the best way into the world,
Right.
which is vaginally, because
Yes, of
that's really
course. And
important. The
and
babies.
presumably,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, no, absolutely. And presumably all the I forget what it's called, but all the stuff that has to come down the umbilical cord that is going to prepare that baby
Yes.
is also must be triggered at the same time to go, oh, okay, this is part of that,
Mm-hmm.
ejection process to send the kiddie on his way. And
Yeah, absolutely.
if you just take a knife and go, right, okay, it's now, and pull it out, just
Mm,
because that's the time they want to do it,
yeah.
then all of that good stuff that is there to prepare a child for the future, the colostrum or whatever it
Yeah.
is that the same thing? I mean, I know it's with a cow, but in the milk, the
Yeah,
colostrum
you
is
do for the first couple of days. And that's the thing as well. In the normal progress of labor, you'll get oxytocin, which will then lead, and the labor will then lead
right.
to milk letdown. A lot of
Yes.
C-section babies, the mums really struggle to have their milk come in, and therefore the formula push, and then we've got a dietary issue, and then we're getting
Yeah.
allergies coming in, and it's just like, I mean, these poor kids, there's no wonder there's a health crisis in the world. And I mean, it's right under their noses. They
Yeah.
know. They know.
So there you are. So you did it all naturally. How did it go?
Well, with my first one,
No,
oh,
with your
that'll,
second, with your
oh, with
second
my
one.
second one, yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time it came to that stage, I was like, no, I'm going to prove that a woman's body knows exactly what to do. And
Right.
um, so during that process, obviously I'd already done a postgrad in peds, and I'd worked with a lot of babies. Like the youngest baby I've ever adjusted was 5 days old. Went in just after it was born, and it's a very anyone who specializes in adjusting babies, it is one of the most gentle. It's almost like a breath
What
in
do
your
you mean
job.
by adjusting them?
So yeah, I guess that term doesn't get used as much. It's a chiropractic term that they're trying to actually wash out of the terminology, because they prefer to use the term manipulate. But it's really a process of if you imagine there was a light bulb and you've got a power station and you've got all these lines that go to it, there's ways that, chemical stresses and physical stresses and other things can sometimes, let's say, tamp out the line and the light goes out. So it's going through and finding the blockages in the energy, which can show up in a lot of different ways. To me, I can run my hand down someone's back and I'll literally feel whether there's blocks in the energy. I don't necessarily have to palpate them. I will, because I like to double check. Or kids that have got like a lot of stuff going on, or they've been really juiced up, I can tell straight away by touching its head because of the energetic difference in that little one. So adjusting them is basically allowing to facilitate that energy moving the way that it's meant to move so that the body can heal itself, because ultimately I can't heal anybody, but I can help facilitate so the intelligence of the body heals itself.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and being born is a bit stressful. It's like 70 pounds of pressure that's
Well,
coming down on that baby. And particularly, I mean, this was a little C-section baby, bless her. But, and with those ones, I teach my mums how to actually strip them out with a massage, because it's really important that our babies are born naturally. And one of the reasons I harp onto this is because here in Australia, I mean, the C-section rates are rising and rising, and it's just leaving more and more kids having an improper start, really. And the trauma to mums, the amount of mums that I've worked with that have consistent bladder issues and back issues and headaches from the epidurals, because it's changed the pressure between the cranial system and the rest of the spine. So there's just all these massive. So obviously I became very, very passionate about it. I went, no, I'm going to do it myself. So I became very obsessed with looking at certain things, such as like the cord being wrapped around its neck, and which was quite funny, because then when I had my baby, the cord was wrapped twice around his neck. And I knew that I was going into labor, and I actually told my partner. And at this point, I was 42 weeks and 3 days over. And, again, that I'm just saying, because it's kind of like a lot of people freak out once you go past about 41 weeks, and it's normal. It's completely normal. And yeah, it just sort of, it built. It was sort of like those Braxton Hicks contractions where the uterus, the stomach goes a little bit hard and then it relaxes, and just kept going. And then I went to sleep and I woke up in the middle of the night, and my partner's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in labor. I've been telling you all day I'm in labor," because he didn't actually believe me yet. He's like, "Oh man, this baby's never coming." So I got up, and I was only a few minutes apart, and I ended up getting into the bath for about half an hour. But otherwise, I was just really rocking and moving and breathing and talking to my baby. And then he just came on out, and we popped the cord back over his head, and he came out. And he was a little bit blue, I suppose you could say, when he first came out. And my partner freaked. But again, I'd prepped myself. Those were sort of the things that were really important to me. I was like, how do I resuscitate my baby if something happens? How do I do this? Because, there's risk with home birth, but I mean, there's a ton of risk with going to the hospital.
Yeah.
You'll get cut open, you'll get disturbed, you'll probably get pushed for a C-section, you're going to get harassed, you're going to get fear-mongered, you're going to be stressed out. You might start a stressful attachment with your baby, or affect your breastfeeding, which is going to actually affect your bonding and your recovery.
Yes.
And it's major surgery. There's no other surgery that we have where they go and they cut someone open, major surgery, and then go, oh, now you can go and pick some stuff up and clean and look after 3 other kids, or whatever else is happening.
Yeah. So your baby came out slightly blue. What did you do?
I rubbed him till he cried, because
Right.
I tried that first, and then he did it pretty fast, and he
Right.
made a little squeak, and he was all good. And I leave the cord attached for as long as possible, because if you're cutting that cord, all of those nutrients and oxygen are then getting deprived from the baby. And also there's more likelihood that the mum can have bleeding issues, say if that's tugged out or if that's cut prematurely. So I let that all just happen, and it kind of like flops out eventually, because you're so immersed in baby land.
So what sort of I mean, not we had the conventional, someone had to come and cut the cord and all this sort of stuff. I think the midwife may have left it a little bit longer than it would have been in the hospital because of the home birth. But what sort of time would you normally, what would be, a minute or two or an hour or?
a few hours to a few days when it falls off naturally.
Oh,
I waited a few hours and
I
then
mean, you're connected to the baby for a few days, like a
no,
bungee.
because do you mean like when the placenta comes out? It's about half an hour to an hour after baby's born, and it will
Right,
come out naturally.
right.
And even with starting some breastfeeding straight up, because the breastfeeding actually promotes the uterus coming back down, which again is really important that women are breastfeeding because
Yeah.
otherwise their uterus isn't contracting back down into its. I mean, it never really goes to the full original position, but it will contract back down, and it's really important for healing and hormones, and there's so much more increased risk of postnatal depression with C-sections, and that's really disrupting this bond. And then we start getting into this whole issue of almost like a loss of the maternal instinct. Remember how I was saying before, like when there's stress and they become detached from their baby, so they feel like it's okay to put their 6-week-old baby that was just living for 9 months inside of them into a daycare to be raised by absolute strangers.
Yes.
And some people, they have to do that. Like, this isn't about making anyone feel bad about it. It's just more looking at that sometimes it's actually a loss of the instinct of going, that baby is my devotion, that baby is my entire world. And it's coming back to sort of that place.
Yes. Well, we've now tried to fit in the creation of another member of the world, a human being or a man or woman, however you want to describe it. We have to be so careful with these silly words
We
now that we use.
do.
But as if we just fit it in, as if it's baking a cake or making a pie. It's like, oh, I've just got this baby. I'm just going to shove it over there now, and when I've got time, I'll give it some love again. And we've forgotten, really, partly, mostly the reason that we're here. And it seems that we're being so distracted that we have to go and work and keep corporations going and line managers happy and, maternity leave, certain dates. And all of this so artificial to what the whole point of life, it seems to me, is to actually live rather than continually serve masters.
Live and procreate.
Yeah, live and procreate. That's what that's what it's about. It's what animals do.
Yeah. I mean,
Every other bloody species on the planet is doing that. And yet we've decided that, no, I think corporations are going to be, and work and, paying bills and keeping the council and obeying the government and all of that is far more important than actually nurturing our offspring and bringing them into life and showing them the joy of the world that they've just arrived in. I mean, it is a nonsense.
well, I think that's because a lot of people have forgotten the joy
Yes,
of the world. How many people just don't even have they don't see anything magic left in the world. Um,
exactly.
and
And
of
I
course,
mean that.
there's plenty of people that do, but the ones that have lost that childlike innocence about it, and that can, if you get lost with a child and you get it, and should stop saying that. It's just me trying to like communicate with the audience as well. But
Yeah.
um, getting lost with someone who's so little, it's beautiful. It's this
And they
you get.
remind you, don't they? I mean, you've got your little one, and they remind you how awe-inspiring things are because
Mhm.
you've seen a daisy or a daffodil or a tree or something a million times, and you get a bit blasé. Oh yeah, it's just an oak tree. The leaves have gone, a bit orangey because it's autumn over here. It's probably summer where you are,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
spring.
and but your kid's going, how come that's changing colour? Why is that? And
Mm.
it's like, oh, well, it's autumn. So it can be so matter of fact. Well, it's autumn, you stupid idiot, don't you know? No, I'm 1 year old, and this is all bloody new to me, you twerp. Oh yeah, I forgot.
I
And
love
and
it.
this is it. I mean, you see parents talking to, they'll be arguing with their children because their kids have done something wrong
Yeah,
that they see as wrong. And they'll
yeah,
be arguing them as if they've got 30 years of experience to understand the concepts that the adult is saying. He said, don't you understand, you silly? You should have known better that we don't do this kind of thing, blah, blah, blah. And the kid's going, I have no notion of what you are talking about, but I realise that for some reason I've got something wrong. And you
yeah.
know, and people have forgotten the wonders, as you say. So let me go back to, so your baby was born, and you had no complications. You brought it out, it went blue, you
Yeah.
rubbed it, it started to breathe, you let the
Yeah.
placenta come out naturally, and
Very
all
bright
was.
young man now. He's 7.5.
And so you came to that point where you had to inform the authorities that you have added to the huge number of people on this globe, or
Yeah.
flat plane, whatever you want to believe. So now I'm expecting you to say, although you have told me before we were recording, I'm expecting you to say, of course I didn't register my child because why would I want to give away title, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
But of course you didn't know all of that at the time. So I'm assuming then that you did register.
Yeah, my boys are registered. My daughter's not because,
Ah,
yeah. And it was actually the father that registered my two other boys, so I wasn't going to
right.
register them at all. Which he's entitled to do. He doesn't know any
Yes.
better. Um,
So how does that work then with the daughter? I mean, are you,
um,
you're not getting paperwork from the government now. Are they chasing you up or?
no, because I've had three freeborns, which means that there was not one medical visit. There was not one midwife or doctor or anyone making a conception date marked down in a file anywhere. So they've never been to a doctor in their entire life.
Wow. So just explain what I'm writing that down.
Freeborn,
Freeborn. Yeah. What does
yeah.
that mean? Because I'm immediately, you won't remember this, but in the 1960s, I think it was, there was a film called Born Free. It was about lions and tigers, and it's got
Oh, I
terrific.
think I've seen that when I
It's
was a
got a
kid.
terrific theme. Born free as free. Anyway, I won't sing it because that'll turn people off.
Oh, that was good.
But but Matt Monro sung it anyway. But it talks about lions and tigers being born free. They should be free, not in parks and and
Mhm.
and and all of that. Now I'm assuming this is what you're saying about us
Well,
out
Richard,
of the system.
you know how we're a little bit like animals?
Yeah.
It's almost like we're animals in an artificial zoo. And I guess that zoo is even in the hospital. It's in the school. I mean, that's why they get them to put their birth certificate in, so then they can join that little living being and once again give away our power to authorities that don't even know our kid and doesn't know anything about them.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so like I said, I ended up doing, I'm not sure if I did say on air, but I ended up registering my first son because even though this had been a topic I'd always been interested in and sort of researched as a kid and that sort of thing, I didn't know anyone who knew anything about it. I mean, most of
Right.
my friends thought I was, crazy for even wanting to freeborn, and particularly when I was on that whole track thing. They were just like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Like,
So just
go
to
to
go
the
back to
hospital. It's so much safer. I'm like, dude,
yes.
after what they did and their abuse of power, there is no way I am ever putting my trust into their hand. Like, I trust my body and I trust that I'm actually going to survive this and
Yes.
that my baby and I will be okay. Like, that feels right to me. And then by the second freeborn, obviously it was a lot easier. And by the third one, it was just, I would have 100 more
Gosh, that's a lot of
babies coming
children.
out. But if I didn't have to
Like
go through the
peas,
pregnancy
like
part,
yeah, like peas in a pod. So freeborn, freeborn is that thing is basically away from the state and the administration, government
Mhm.
control, and everything, even to the point of registering. Would you say that? Is that what it
uh,
means?
there are people that free. Okay, so really, there's the hospital, which is all the intervention, the doctors, the midwives, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Then there's the private midwives and doulas that sometimes can attend a homeborn
Right.
situation where a woman has their baby at home, maybe in a water bath or in the shower or something, and there'll be a registered midwife. And as part of her being there, they fill in this yellow
They
card.
fill in yeah.
And then that gets sent to birth, deaths, and marriages, which means that there's no way out of them already, which means birth, deaths, and marriages will be now hounding them, going, well, why haven't you sent this in so we can,
Right.
open up a
So if
nice
you
little trust fund.
if you ignore exactly, so if you ignore all of that and you just go, I've just had a baby and nobody
Yeah,
knows.
exactly. And there's more and more people doing it.
But yeah, and so when that happens,
Mhm.
no one. I mean, the state doesn't know, but there's no one going. She ought to have 3 children, but she's actually got 6. Where did the others come from? Oh, the stork brought them. Oh, right. Okay, it's all right. The stork brought them. That's all right. I mean, do you get hounded? Do you get questioned? Do you ever, do the kids get, where is your
No,
national
well,
insurance certificate or anything?
no, because they don't go to
No.
doctors, and I homeschool, and
Right.
so my first son did go to a school, but when all the madness hit the fan back in 2020, I was like, well, I homeschooled. I loved it. I've always wanted to do it, and obviously, I was going to homeschool the younger ones. But yeah, that was kind of. I thought, no, I'm just going to leap into it. So I went into that whole thing. So I'm not obviously needing to register them or juice them
No.
up in order to go to because over here you can't get your kid into daycare unless you want to pay $140 $50 a day, which no one can afford to do
No.
because that's all they're making if they're at work, hopefully. um, and you only get rebates or help with daycare if your baby has been juiced. And then to go to school, it's not allowed into kindy. It's not until they're pre-primary. There are a few, obviously, exceptions to that, such as if you've got a healthcare card or Indigenous or First Tribal Nation blood in you. That can also be an exception. But a lot of the times, um, all of the ones that are choosing this way of life, there isn't any support with that other than the communities that we are creating together, which are great.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds to me like you would very much like to see more of this out of the system because the system has let people down. I mean, it's
And
damaging people.
they lie to people
Right.
constantly. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean,
has
if it
anyone
was
seen the news lately?
well,
It's just, I mean, they literally
I don't
come
actually
right
watch the
straight.
news.
Oh, me neither. I don't even have a TV,
No,
but I
exactly.
hear through the
Yeah.
grapevine. Um, and you hear it and you're like, oh, really?
Yeah, and so it is a control mechanism, and they want to be able to and maybe at one time some of it was quite laudable to have systems in place to help people who were nervous or things went wrong or they didn't have family and all of that,
Yeah.
but we need those communities back where you don't need a state system. You need a community of like-minded people who say, well, of course you can, come here if you're a bit nervous about having a child.
Mm.
Sheila's had 10 and Callista's had 100 apparently. So she knows what to do.
I'll be
They
well
like
versed
this.
by then.
Every minute there's another one. And so that's what we need though, isn't it? We don't
Yeah.
need men in white coats or women,
No. But
women
we
who are
need
far
partners involved. We
and
need
partners involved.
yeah, because
Yeah.
a lot of times in the hospital situation, the partner's actually shunned to the side. They're not
Yes.
involved in it. And, we need partners educated. So if they are going to choose a hospital born baby, which is fine, you've got to choose what feels safe,
Yeah.
for the mum. But educating them as well to ask questions of the doctors, not just go, okay, you're saying that, or you're saying this statistic, or you're, pushing to do this intervention or whatever. It's like, well,
Yes.
hang on a second, why are you doing that? And I guess also coming back to, I think I'm gonna digress and just tell a quick story to explain this point. So
Yeah. Do.
there once was a guy that went over to this woman's house and she went to make him a roast chicken dinner and she cut off the top and the bottom of the chicken and popped it in her oven. And he goes, why do you do that? And she goes, oh, I don't know. My mum always did it. And he goes, oh, let's go see your mum. So they went and saw the mum and the mum did the same thing. And he goes, well, why do you do it? She goes, I don't know. My mum did it. So they went and saw the grandmother who was still alive. She did the same thing and she says the same thing, going, my mum did it. Well, the great grandmother was fortunately still alive and they went to see her and they went and questioned her and said, why did you cut the top and the tail off the chicken? She goes, because my oven was only this big. And what I'm saying with this is that people can believe something that is incorrect for a really long time and pass it down through generations. And it's really
Yes.
time to start looking at this and going, hang on a second, having a baby and being pregnant is normal to a woman who is born with a vagina, a normal woman. It is natural to her body. It's as natural as having a menstrual cycle. It's as natural as her digesting food. It is as natural as, jumping around with her kids or whatever else. It is natural, and we've got to stop treating it like disease. And as soon as people
Yes.
can start to shift that perspective, they're going to get away from the fear and giving away their power to a system that's there to extort them.
Mm.
And then they will also stop giving away their fear to, say, registering their babies, which is basically handing over your power. I mean, in the hospital, it becomes a ward of the state. That's why it's born in a ward.
Right.
And then, you usually abandon the placenta. And so the state salvages that and uses it backing for the trust and all that sort of thing. And then you go and register your baby, basically going, well, I'm an incompetent mother. And I didn't realize that that even made me that. I just knew that I didn't want to register my kid. But like I said, with my first one, I didn't know what else to do. And um,
I mean, to me, it always begs the question when you've got this, you look at where we are and you think we're all so sophisticated, we're so clever, aren't we, with our big buildings and all the rest of it. I wonder how some of these ancient tribes that, in deepest, darkest Africa or wherever, or, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and there's not a corporation in sight, not a great big gleaming hospital with people in white coats. How have they ever managed to have a system in which not only can they get pregnant and have a baby, but not
yeah.
register them somewhere and cope? And you just think, well, they seem to have managed this even in our 21st century. And so maybe all this system that we have is not really as necessary as they make out it is.
I don't think it is at all. I think it's almost, it's just a fictional slavery. And as soon as, it's almost like a belief system. And even going through, uh, so I end up going and doing my affidavit. And for your people that have probably seen Alex, who's one of the contributors to the resource, the People's Court of Terra Australis, um, I went and did my affidavit. So part of that affidavit is actually rebutting what happened with registering my baby. So I've actually done that, and also did a affidavit of mother for each one of my kids, which actually becomes the highest and strongest piece of evidence for their so-called identification.
So just for those that may not be quite familiar, what's an affidavit of mother? That's an interesting term.
Yeah, so it's basically a statement of fact. I mean, I should say affidavit because technically that is their word, but it's a proclamation of fact would actually be even better. And what it is saying, I got pregnant on such and such date. This is the father. This is the events when baby was born. And then it also has several paragraphs about rebutting um, the registering and the fact that it's dividing the entity of the birth certificate from my living, breathing son. Or, yeah, well, I didn't register my baby, so it doesn't matter with her.
Mm.
But my son, and creating that and pointing out that that was done in fraud, and then it's important that they're not to be confused with the same thing. So yeah, that's an added layer. And then also the People's Court has also got travel IDs now. So I'm getting one of them for each one of my kids.
So this affidavit of mother is, as you say, is a proclamation saying here is a statement of fact. And I'm the only authority who can tell you this because otherwise it's hearsay. And so in a
Exactly.
court, and if you file it with any courts or authorities and say, this is it, this is me, if you want to question me on anything, it's all in there. And so, that you can't, and unless there's anything in there that you rebut yourselves, and I can rebut your rebuttal if you like, because I'm the one who had the baby,
Yeah.
Nars.
I know.
Exactly. But it's a very lawful thing to do to have that proclamation, and it's a good piece of defence.
Yeah, I think this is where we need to start going as mums and dads, not parents, because they're renting they're a pair
Yeah,
that rent
that's
the
another
kid back.
legalese term.
Yeah, but being, realizing that the two of you have created something, and making steps to protect that, so they don't get caught up in this system. Because as soon as they are registered, then they are caught up in the system.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the biggest things would be to urge people to start looking at their beliefs around pregnancy and birth, because it does start when they conceive and they go into the hospital. That's where it all starts, and it's
Uh,
just further impacted.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And interventions of juices, as you call it, for
Yeah,
children who, or boys and girls, babies, new life, may or may not, may not be a necessary thing to do, and it's not a very natural thing to do,
mm.
to start adding pharmaceutical chemicals to a boy or girl,
Yeah,
when they haven't even had a chance to sort of generate their own immune system
yeah.
and interact with the world, which is strange that they want to do that. And, there may be
And
harmful consequences as a result.
if we're breastfeeding, and again, this urge to breastfeed, like I'm not trying to shame someone who, there's certain circumstances where women really, really, really struggle, and it's
Well,
devastating.
you did say, and
Um,
it's true with Julia. She had two C-sections for both her children
yeah,
because that's what they told her. They couldn't allow her to have a more natural birth, and as
mm,
a result, she struggled. And they pushed them down this corner so that
yeah,
actually the
that's what I
natural
mean.
process
It's
isn't working. Yeah.
so we as the customers need to start going. Well, we don't want our baby born that way, because if we're choosing a situation where a baby is born in this way, where it's upsetting its gut and its health and basically programming it for fear for its life.
Yes.
I mean, you bring it out into white lights and you're detaching it from the mum, or, I mean, at home, it's this, you're just in your element. You can go have a drink of water, or you can go to the toilet, or go have a shower in your own shower and put on clean clothes, and everything's
Oh,
kind of there. And
absolutely. You said just now, we as customers. I mean, that's a horrible term, isn't it? Because we're not
but we
customers.
are the customers of that, and isn't the customer always right? And it's like we remember that if we go to the cafe, although over here, I don't know, the coffee's pretty bad.
Well, I always
So
think a
the
customer
customer
is a.
hasn't been feeding back.
Well, I only say that because I had an issue with the council and they called me dear customer, and I said I'm not a
Oh,
customer
really?
because I've not ordered anything.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They're trying to extract money out of me for just living in a house. And I said, well, I'm not a customer of yours. Thanks very much. You assumed that, and I'm rebutting it.
Have you gone to Bigglesworth?
Biggleswick,
Oh,
Biggleswick.
Biggleswick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to be moving to Biggleswick. So to round up this, I mean, you clearly think that we need. I mean, the way I look at this has been the last 100 years with a lot of the stuff that we've seen on all sorts of different things has been an interesting experiment that modern Paris pharmaceuticals interventions. A lot of the sort of medical stuff and the science has been utilised to try and improve things. But it strikes me after 100 years, it doesn't seem to have really beaten natural processes. And as an experiment, very interesting, but let's not do it anymore and give the power
Pretty
back
much.
to people. Would you agree
Yeah.
with that?
Well, we've got to take it back because we've been giving it away.
Yeah.
We've been giving it away to the churches and the hospitals and the prime minister or the government or the TV, or, I mean, every time we're putting our attention on something, we're technically giving it energy. So it's there's a quote by Socrates that I really like, which is something along the lines of, essentially, don't spend your energy fighting it. Spend all your energy building the new world that you want to create. And I know I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember it word for word. It's actually up in my
But that is
kitchen. I
brilliant, isn't
should
it?
know.
Because no, that is brilliant because we do spend so much time going, how can we stop this? And we protest and we,
Yeah.
do petitions and then we're trying to, but instead just turn your back on that and go, well, that's interesting, but it's not for me. And if more people did that and just sort of got on with it and they said, oh, you're sending me a letter about my children again. It's nothing to do with me. I'm not in your system.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
And the more that have their babies at home and then do homeschooling groups, and we'll literally create whole communities again, because that's where a lot of people are struggling as well, because they are so detached and there's not that
Yes.
tribe. And it's tough being a mum, and it's tough being a dad.
Yes. Well, I mean, dads don't get enough say. I would just put my fingers up there because and I'm not saying that they need to interfere with the birth process and put their foot down, but during that whole process, the father can feel like he is left out, and yet he really needs to get back to the sort of, well, I'm the provider, so to
Yeah.
provide the nest is doing the providing,
Or just
and
protect that woman and his
protect.
baby from
Exactly.
being coerced, pressured. I mean, they
Right.
get them to sign consent forms in the middle of labor. It's like
Yeah.
their head's not there. They're
No.
not going to comprehend that information right now.
No. And presumably then you can come back and say, well, that was coercion, so therefore it's void. You
Yeah,
know,
we
that
should all do a
contract.
class action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true though, is it not? I mean, if someone's saying, well, you just need to do a consent form here, and it's like, hang on a second, I can see the head coming out, and what do I do? Yeah, right there. Then if
Yeah.
that's, you're not bringing the minds together in that agreement, that contract, and so therefore that's null and void, because you were under pressure, you weren't fully engaged with the contract, you were in the bit trying to witness the birth of your baby, and some idiot's going, oh yes, I just need you to sign this little piece of paper, and you're going, yeah, yeah, whatever. I want to, I want to be here for the magic.
That actually reminds me, Richard, I'll tell you a funny story. When I was 16 and I was playing cricket with my boyfriend at the time, and the poor bugger, he ended up with a ball to his testicles, and
Oh,
he didn't do
ball
anything
to
about it. And a
ball to
ball to the
ball.
ball, pretty much, yes. And he didn't do anything about it. And it was like starting to get like a hydro seal. It was like water going into and in
Oh,
and around it. I'm like, dude, you're going to have to actually go to the hospital. Like, you're going to end up with testicular strangulation or something. And I was freaking out because I'd never been in a hospital in my life at this stage. And
right.
here I am at 16. And anyway, took him in there. And one of the first things that they did was they actually gave him some form of painkiller, which is fair enough. He was in a lot of pain. But then he's like this. And they put this consent form in front of him. And I remember I started standing there. I was like, hang on a second. He can't even think right now. I mean, he's off his face now. You
Mm.
can't get him to now sign a consent form. And anyway, they chucked me out of the room and ended up taking him in for surgery because they didn't like my attitude, I guess. But it's that same sort of thing. They go in
Yeah.
and that is not informed consent.
No.
Um,
No, you've got to have the meeting of the minds, and both got to be on, on the level playing field to be able to agree to something. You can't do it if you're drugged up or in
mm,
severe pain, and it's done as a formality. Well, it's not a formality;
yeah,
it's an agreement between two parties, isn't it? And people
yeah.
forget that.
And
Um,
also, I think when we're there to help our clients, we're there to educate them. We really want to give them all the information so they can make the choice that they really want to make that feels right for them, because that's informed consent. Whereas if you're only giving them a little bit of information, you're not actually informing them at all. And if I was to inform all the women,
Full
the
disclosure.
our body actually knows what to do. The biggest thing we can start doing is getting back inside our bodies, not distracted over all of these other things and everything that's
Yes.
ever happened, but actually coming back into here and trusting that our body knows what to do and staying out of these systems because they're not serving us. They're
Right.
literally screwing up our kids. They're
Yeah.
screwing up relationships even because of the amount of trauma and stress that ends up impacted. I mean, have you seen the rate of autism?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going through the roof. No,
Oh,
no. I mean, so many kids have got it, ADHD and all of that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I need to wrap up the interview, unfortunately, but
It's
tell us
okay.
what the Calista show talks about on YouTube.
Yeah, well, that was something I wanted to do for a couple of years, and it was actually I was really scared of the camera, so I had to get over that. So it was a bit of a delay, and plus I was pumping out kids. But basically, the channel
Should have just
is
filmed the whole
really.
thing, and people would have
I
found it
should
fascinating.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, but remember the camera paranoia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, the
Um,
camera. That's another one. You missed that one.
um, I wanted to create a channel that inspired people and empowered them and helped educate them and also helped connect them. And I figured if I started just, for a long time, I edited myself, Richard. I kind of got out and there was no one who thought like I did. And I had this kind of grand idea that we could live in communities and we'd all live on beautiful properties and, grow food and, you know, we wouldn't be sort of raping Mother Earth for different
Mm,
things and going through and pillaging and destroying and cutting down trees or just, removing babies from their mothers or, any of
mm.
this sort of stuff. And so, I had a very dreamy kind of outlook on the world. And I guess the thing is I actually feel like we're really getting closer to that. And if people could just kind of be okay to be a little bit a part of that, even creating something in their backyards, it's going to completely change everything in a really quick period of time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel the pressure. We've been going along towards a precipice,
Mm,
and sooner or later, we're going to reach a point where everybody, I think, has got to sort of go. This is just not the right way,
yeah.
and many people have realised that well in advance because they've been thinking people, open to ideas, perhaps spiritual, whatever it is. Some of the sort of ones that have just been so brainwashed, they have
Mm,
yet to sort of, they had the blinkers on, they're still thinking material things, they're still thinking, yeah, you have the baby over there, I work over here, then we go home, watch the telly, and that's life. And it's like,
mm.
okay, you have yet to realize what life is.
And that's
But
like being on antidepressants. There's no highs and lows. There's just this.
yeah. And
Whereas when
then
you're
we have the,
freeborn, you can't go back,
no,
Richard, and it gets better every time. Like it was an orgasmic birth with my daughter.
wow.
I wasn't sure. I was tripping on bliss. It was incredible, and and because there was no fear anymore.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to follow Calista and have an orgasmic birth, you know what to do. I think people will be lining up for that one. Calista, thank you so much for coming and telling your story and inspiring people, because I think there will be people who watching this, and maybe people will share this video to those who are pregnant or thinking about having children or thinking about what should I do in the hospital or registering children and
Mm,
nervous about it. And it is so rewarding to hear people talk about this in such a positive way. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure the audience do too. So, thanks for being brave and going against the system, because that's what we've got to do,
yeah. Well, we'll
haven't
just
we?
build a new one. We don't have to go
And
against
well,
anything. We
that's
just
what
let's
by
build a new one.
turning our back on it and building
Yeah.
another one. Exactly, absolutely, and not just acquiescing because of fear.
Hmm.
So,
This
yeah.
has
So
been so much fun. Thank you,
yeah, no,
Richard.
it's been a pleasure. Sorry, it's not longer, but I tried to sort of keep them nice and short. And well, if and so people can find you on your YouTube still going, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
at the
it's
Calista.
only been going 3 months. It's only a
Oh,
baby.
okay. Oh, brilliant. So people go and check that out at it'd be the at sign presumably on YouTube
Yep.
at the Calista Show. I'll put a link in the description, so go and follow, and then you can ask loads of questions. I'm sure build up a lovely audience with Calista. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Thank you so much. Really
You too,
enjoyed it.
Richard. Yeah, me
And
too. Thank
good
you.
luck with the other. How many did you say you've got? 6.
No, only four.
Oh, you've only got 4, so you've got
Only
90,
four.
96 to go.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I feel sorry for your
That's
boyfriend.
okay. I'm
Uh,
planning on living for until I'm 200, so I've still got
oh,
plenty of time left.
oh, well, there we go. You'll
Yeah,
you'll
why not?
you'll wear all the men out.
Okay, we should probably end it there.
Yeah. Well, there we are,
Thank
ladies and
you.
gentlemen. In the meantime, I will be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. But from Calista and I, thanks so much for watching. Till next
Thanks.
time. Bye bye.